Hi everyone, my name is Stephanie Chu and I'm the People and Payroll Coordinator here at the Charity for Civil Servants. I'm also a mental health ally, a member of our staff group, and also one of the inclusion champions here at the charity. It's great to have so many of you here for the conference today, interested in finding out how to look after yourselves and your loved ones who are starting out in the civil service. Starting out in a new workplace can be exciting and naturally would want to thrive at work. As the pressure to perform at work kicks in, together with demands from everyday life, sometimes it's just easy to fall into the trap of compromising our well-being just to catch up with them. But our mental health and well-being are just as important as our goals and deadlines, and we know our well-being is vital to our successes. So we want to do it in a sustainable way, like setting boundaries, taking a break when you need one, and don't be afraid to ask for support. I understand that coping mechanisms work differently for everyone, but hopefully the session today will give you some new perspectives and practical examples on thriving in those crucial early years. It's my pleasure to introduce you to the panel discussion on navigating the early years. Enjoy watching and thank you for being part of this with us.
Hello, and welcome to this session on mental health and wellbeing in your early career as part of the civil service. Joined today by a range of individuals who are all early in their careers, who have very kindly given up the time to share their experience, thoughts and reflections with you all. We're going to start with some introductions, if that's okay, and I think we'll pass to Georgina first. So please could you just give a bit of an intro to your name, your department, your role, and sort of your experience of starting out in the civil service.
Hi everyone, I'm Georgina Beatty. I am currently an SEO based in the Treasury. I am a policy advisor based in the Enterprise and Growth Unit in the Treasury, and I've been here for almost 2 years. Prior to that, I was a primary school teacher, so I've had quite a big transition, lots of ups, lots of downs, which we can get into. But I'm in a good place now, and I'm happy to be here.
Amazing. Barry, would you like to go next?
Yes, hi, so my name's Barry. I joined the civil service through the operational delivery apprenticeship scheme, and I'm currently an administrative officer working in Universal Credit. And before I joined the civil service, I was actually working in retail, so joining the civil service was a big change for myself.
Amazing. Nat, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so my name's Nat. I work as an EO in the Department for Work and Pensions, and I work in national services as part of Universal Credit, and essentially I'm a telephony agent. There's a little bit of more like administrative work that I've also done like in the last couple of months, but like the main roles telephony. And I started this job in November of last year, so I'm 10 months basically in this role.
Excellent. Amber, over to you.
Hi, so I'm Amber. I'm a project delivery fast streamer. I'm just coming up to the end of the project delivery scheme in the next month or so. So I'm currently based in DWP at Department for Work and Pensions as a business case manager.
Excellent. And last but not least, Anna.
Hi, yeah, my name's Anna. I'm working for the Department of Business and Trade as an employee experience and engagement officer. So I'm new. I'm 2 months old in this role, and I'm completely new to this civil service as well. So I was previously working in the NHS as a psychological wellbeing practitioner. So again, a big change, but there are similarities within that though. So yeah, that's me.
Fabulous. And my name is Jess. I currently work as a policy designer in the Department for Education. I've been doing this for about 2 years now, and this was my first job after university. I joined via the Fast Stream internship scheme. I did a summer placement here and then stayed on, couldn't quite get rid of me. I will be your chair for today, and I'll be asking all of these guys some really interesting questions to get their insights on the start of their careers and how they managed and supported their well-being during that time. So without further ado, I think I will come to Nat first, if that's okay. So we know that sort of securing your job in the civil service, particularly when it's your first job, can be really challenging. And many people face barriers to accessing work and getting sort of over that threshold to secure their first role. So could you tell us a little bit about sort of how you found that recruitment and onboarding process when you entered the civil service?
Yeah, so I think it was a little bit of a mixed bag, to be honest with you. So I applied as like an external applicant, so it was just applying through civil service jobs, and then basically obviously did the interview, told I was successful, and then didn't really know what to expect next. So in my final year of university, I had some health issues. So like this, that was one of the reasons I was looking at joining the civil service, is because like I sort of viewed them as a more sort of compassionate employer than perhaps like some in the private sector. So sort of like I get this offer, and they're like, do you accept this offer? And then like one of the options was have a chat with occupational health. And I thought that sounded like useful to me, but then I was a bit unsure because obviously like I only had a provisional offer. I didn't know like how much I wanted to tell them. Like I wasn't sure whether this was some sort of trick where I'd like disclose all my health issues and then they'd say, oh, that's lovely, no job for you. So it was a little bit tricky, and I guess that's just from not knowing. So I ended up like I did talk with them, and they were really nice and lovely. I think one thing I struggled a bit with was that my communication seemed to be through either occupational health or sort of HR rather than like the team I was actually joining. And this caused some issues. So for instance, like as a result of my health, I wanted to work part-time. And when I sort of said this, they said, oh, you'll have to do training. And then at the end of training, like 6 weeks, you can ask to go to part-time. And I found that quite difficult and stressful because like being able to work part-time was a deal breaker for me. So I was like, I'm not sure whether to start this. Like I don't want to start and then have to like quit a few weeks in if it's just not an option. So I think that's something that could have perhaps been a bit better for me. And then another thing in terms of that was I found the job description quite unclear. Like on the job description, it sort of listed that like telephony was an aspect of the work, but it said that you'd also be dealing with sort of admin, emails. That was sort of the suggestion, was that that would be part of the work. And then like I get there and sort of like a week or two into training, it becomes clear that actually like I'm going to be on telephones all day. And that was quite an unexpected and perhaps slightly unwelcome surprise as well. So I think that's something else that would have like benefited me, was like a better understanding of what the job actually was.
Yeah, it definitely can be really challenging, particularly if you're not used to reading civil service job descriptions, understanding the jargon and how it's phrased, and especially when roles are potentially still like a bit undefined. I think you touched on this slightly when you mentioned occupational health, but is there anything that like you did yourself or your department did to really support your well-being as you were starting that role?
Yeah, so I was in touch with occupational health, so I had a call with them before I started, and then I ended up having like another meeting with them a few weeks after I started, once it sort of became clearer, like what could help me like do my role. And like it was really good that that was an option for me. Now, unfortunately, when I first started this job, like due to sort of I'm still not entirely sure why, but I essentially had 3 line managers within my first like month of working, and basically like even though I had these reports, they kind of got lost in this shuffle. So like the idea was really good, perhaps the execution was a little bit like, basically if that could have worked, I think I would have found things a lot easier and a lot better. Just in terms of another thing that the department did well, like basically when I did ask to go part-time, they were really supportive, and basically it was really easy for me to do that. Like basically it got to the end of my training, I said like, please can I go part-time, and they let me start going part-time from that week. So that was incredibly good.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that's something that we hear a lot, is that the flexibility and the support around flexible working in the civil service is incredible. And that's lots of people's experience, and something that evidently particularly supported you with your like circumstances and health conditions. Again, I think you've sort of touched on this, but just for those watching, what are the maybe like 2 or 3 really key things that would have helped you to settle in a bit better and would have helped to support your well-being in those first couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think I've touched on it a little bit, but probably like the main things that would have helped me was like a bit of a better understanding of what my job actually was. Like if I'd known before I started, oh, you just have to do this training and then they'll be fine with you going part-time. Oh, this is actually what your job is. Like I think if I'd known that, it would have made adjusting to it a bit easier. Whereas instead, like it kind of felt like a lot of things were being chucked at me in my first couple of weeks, and then on top of that, like it was my first job out of university, so it was already quite a intense time as it was. And then like I was sort of, yeah, I think a bit more clarity might have helped. So if I could go back, that's what I'd explain to myself.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Anna, turning now to you, you've just started really, really recently with the civil service, and starting a new role can feel incredibly overwhelming, especially when you're like live in those first couple of weeks and still finding your feet. So could you tell us a bit about what has helped you feel more settled and supported in your first couple of weeks?
Yeah, of course, it can definitely feel so overwhelming and intimidating when you're first trying to find your feet and your new job and you're new to the civil service entirely. I would say the main thing that really helped me, even prior to starting, was my manager reached out once I formally confirmed my job offer. She wasn't in the panel, but she reached out to introduce herself, explain who she was and her role, and organised a call. So this was a 30-minute call prior to starting, to really just to get to know each other. And in that 30-minute call, it took away so many uncertainties, so many worries, because I've already overcome that barrier. You know, I've met my line manager. I had the opportunity to ask questions. But we all know, you know, after you get off the call with someone, then you've suddenly got kind of more questions coming in. And actually, my line manager reached out 2 more times. So we had 3 calls prior to starting. So I was able just to note down kind of any questions that came in, and bring this to my manager prior to starting. So this was things like, you know, my first day, my first month, what's going to look like for me. So much of that uncertainty was taken away, which was so helpful in terms of just feeling anxious, out of place. And one of the things she said to me, she spoke about her own experience in starting and said, actually, it can feel really overwhelming, and that's really normal. And she mentioned that, you know, everyone's experience is different in terms of starting in. You're going to do things at your own pace. And she said that we'll figure out yours together. And even just that sentence just eased everything entirely in terms of, you know, starting. So what I would say to people, if you have that opportunity, well, one, ask for that opportunity if it hasn't already been offered, just for a line of communication. So, you know, you can ask these questions prior to starting. I think it's so important, and it changed my experience entirely. But to just note those down as well as they come in, to make sure, because obviously everyone's going to have concerns, worries, questions. So I think that's so important, and that was so helpful. But she also opened the line of communication, so she gave me an email address if I had any questions. Another way my manager actually supported me in my first week was setting up one-to-one calls with every member of the team. When they first told me that, I was like, oh, that's scary, like I can't do that. But actually it was so helpful. I was able to, you know, note down who everyone was, what they do, and who to go to if they had questions, if I had questions. And every single person in my team, you know, opened the opportunity for me to ask questions, and have been a kind of point of contact ever since. So although it did feel scary, it was so helpful to do. And finally, I think a point to kind of really get settled in is prioritize training. So the induction trainings, you know, learning how the intranet works, learning the systems, learning the organizational structures. Someone sent me an acronym list. So I've had that bookmarked for the, you know, the civil service jargon. So that was so helpful. But my main kind of point to this was my line manager, I think, did entirely change that experience and making it really positive with that open line of communication. So yeah, that would be my kind of advice for settling in.
Incredible. Thank you so much. And Georgina, coming coming from teaching, could you sort of tell us a little bit about the really big differences that you notice between the two careers, and perhaps a bit about how like that change has impacted your well-being specifically?
Yeah, definitely. And you're right, it is a really big change, probably similar to what Anna's kind of experienced coming from the NHS, I think you said. One of the biggest things is flexibility, as Nat has said. So I'll not go too much into that. But compared to teaching, when you're expected to be there in term time every day, having the autonomy to kind of choose. Even I work full time, I don't have any non-working days, but having the chance to choose, I can start later today, I can finish early if I've got something on the weekend, I can take half a day as flexi. That is just such a benefit to your mental health. It helps with your work-life balance as well, things that you want to do for fun, but also things that you need to do, like going to the dentist or, you know, waiting in the house for somebody to come and fix the boiler or something like that. That's been a huge benefit. I think another big difference for me was working remotely. A lot of my team are based in London, and there's some people based up here in Darlington with me, but a lot of them are based in London. And although I enjoyed working from home, that was just a huge difference. I'd not used Teams. Emails weren't really important to me. I'd never had to book holiday. It was just a huge difference. Not necessarily good, not necessarily bad, a bit of both, I would say, but it was just so different to get your head around, which can be really overwhelming. And not knowing people face to face. I was used to going to a classroom every day, talking to people constantly. And I think having that split is hard to build those relationships. As Anna said, having intro calls with people does really help. But I also think people coming to visit. My line manager came up to Darlington, although he was based in London, he came up to Darlington on my first day. And I really valued that. I would really encourage everybody to do that if you're across two different sites, because it's a lot to start and kind of jump into something if there's not face-to-face connection there, particularly kind of coming from a career where you have had that. I think it might be different if you've already worked in an office, if you've already worked in the civil service, but I was used to having real people in front of me, so I really appreciated when he came up. And the other huge difference, I think, is having the time to network. That was such a big difference to me. There was no time in teaching to talk to other teachers, even in the same year group as you, let alone in different year groups, different schools. That would have been so beneficial. So I've really kind of taken that opportunity. And I have like a little network and list of people that I meet for coffee in the Darlington Economic Campus. Is really good for matching people up across departments. And I basically just have a list of people who I've met, what they work on. And I think prioritizing that time and making the most of it is a really good tip. I'd recommend everybody do that.
Amazing. And yeah, I think you've already sort of illustrated some of the really important things that departments and managers can do to sort of support people who are navigating a career change, like making sure that you get that face-to-face connection and supporting your team to make sure that they have opportunities to network and understanding those differences. But is there anything else specifically that you think departments or managers could do to help support people who are coming into the civil service having already had a different career previously?
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, Jess. Myself and another girl based here started a career changers network because we found that you need to take that into consideration. Line managers need to think about, where has this person came from? What were they doing before? You can't necessarily have a one size fits all approach. So the network that we've started basically just pairs people up with a buddy, hopefully from a similar previous career, but if not, just somebody who thinks the civil service is a bit weird. You know, compared to what they had before, it's obviously great, it's obviously wonderful, there's loads of benefits to it, but it can be really daunting. And unfortunately, we have had people in the Career Changers Network who've left because they struggle to navigate that change, and it does affect your well-being. You know, your self-worth is totally different because you're not sure what you're doing, you don't know how to behave, you don't know how to work. And I just think having that support of somebody who's in a similar boat is really helpful. And I think we're also doing some work on internal to HMT on the induction process, because like I said, that shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all approach. Line managers should be able to kind of assess where they've come from and adapt the process to kind of get you up to speed.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Barry, turning now to your experience, you started the civil service via an apprenticeship. So could you tell us a little bit more about the sort of support that you received like through that apprenticeship and how that impacted your well-being and your success in your early career?
Yeah, so like a few of us joining the civil service was a bit daunting to myself, especially coming from a retail environment. But the support was absolutely fantastic. So we were assigned a support officer from day one. We were also allocated an on-site mentor, and they were instrumental in helping us just get on our feet from day one. We also had our management, obviously, but if there was any sort of questions that you might have been a wee bit embarrassed asking, or picking up new terminology, new systems that you didn't exactly want to just keep referring to your manager for, you could go to your mentor and you could go to your support officer to discuss these, and they were fantastic at helping us. And there was also networking events, so we were very fortunate to take part in networking events with both current and former apprentices, not only from the department I was working in, but other departments. So we were able to share stories and hear best practice, and it gave you a bit of it made you feel like you weren't alone in this journey. You get to hear their insights and hear what sort of strategies they took to help themselves, and so it was very beneficial that way. Being an apprentice as well, we were studying, so some people might join the civil service and go straight into their post, but for myself as an apprentice, we had to study 1 day a week, and that was also good because it gave you a sense of achievement while you were doing your qualifications, as well as being able to apply what you've learned from college in a workplace environment. And so it definitely had an absolutely fantastic impact on my well-being. It boosted my confidence and made me feel like I belonged. Because as I was saying, coming from retail into the civil service, it was a big change. And although there is transferable skills, but it's new systems, new way of working, and you do have to do a bit of shifting to apply what you know into a new place of work. But the support was fantastic, and that's how we got here today.
Incredible. Thank you so much for sharing. And finally, Amber, coming to you. You joined the civil service via the fast stream, so that involves lots of moving around departments and locations, and also, like similar to Barry, doing training alongside of your day job. So could you tell us a little bit about how that model impacted your well-being, positive and negative, and any sort of support that you received through that programme that made a difference to your well-being?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'll end up echoing some of the great stuff that other people have already said. So in terms of how that impacted my well-being, I'd say it's challenging and probably a bit daunting, especially for me, because I found out that as part of the fast stream, I'd be relocating across the country. And I actually had to look up where I was moving to on a map because I hadn't heard of the place before. But it all ended up really well, and we've ended up staying here in the West Midlands because we like it so much. But at the time, that was quite challenging and nerve-wracking, but also quite exciting. And then in terms of things that made a positive difference, just to echo what everyone else has already kind of been talking about, I think talking to people that have been or are going to be in a similar situation to you is really important. So yes, that's other fast streamers, but also most people in your team can empathize with what it feels like to start a new job or move to a new place or be in a stressful situation. So people are often a lot more understanding than you think they're going to be when you kind of share that vulnerability with them. But also things like joining networks. So particularly on the fast stream, networks have a special purpose in that they provide a bit of continuity. You might move from job to job to job, but the networks you're in, you can stay part of, helps you feel a bit more as like part of a community. And also, I can't remember who it was, spoke about getting a buddy or a mentor. That's really valuable too, as often those relationships go with you as you move from posting to posting. Also, what someone said about having a welcome chat. So I've had quite a few managers, as you can imagine, if I'm switching jobs every 6 months or so. One of my best managers gave me a welcome call before I started, which was really valuable for all the reasons Anna talked about, but also pre-arranged all of my introduction calls across the team, which most managers don't do, but that made it a big difference because sometimes when you start, you don't even know who you need to be introduced to because it's all new. So that helped. And they also gave me a list of all the other fast streamers who are starting in nearby teams. So that was super valuable because I could go out straight away and say hello and then speak to people that are in the same boat as me. Also like time management. So you've got lots of different things going on with the training and the different courses you're on, and also the job itself. You're learning it at the same time. So I found having like regular touch points with my manager where we kind of broke down what I was going to be working on, what was actually a priority and what wasn't, because everything feels really urgent at the start when you don't really know the job that well. And also just putting some boundaries in place to make sure that I had the time to do the study and the training that I needed to do. And then the last thing I'd just say is sort of playing the new person card, which, as you can imagine, again, switching jobs a lot, I'm often the new person. So it just gives you should always feel comfortable to ask questions, right? But it definitely gave me extra freedom to ask all of the questions that I thought might be silly by just mentioning that I'm new and I'm looking to learn. So yeah, those are some reflections. And then one final thing, which is unique to the fast stream, but I feel like can be applicable in other situations, is obviously I had to move across the country at quite short notice, as that's kind of what the fast stream is unless you have a relocation restriction. But I received a lot of support from the fast stream team around relocation funding and finding new accommodation and that kind of stuff, which made it a bit easier. I didn't have to worry about the financial side of moving because they provided some extra funds to enable me to do that. I know that doesn't apply to normal jobs, but what I would say is speak to your line manager about the intranet and the support that is available, as there may be things out there that help, but you wouldn't necessarily think to look for them. So that would be my last tip.
Brilliant. That is really useful, and I'm sure that lots of people who are on the fast stream, thinking about the fast stream, or as you say, lots of those tips are applicable beyond the fast stream program, will find that really helpful. So thank you. Coming back to Anna now, as someone who is very much in the weeds of a new job and has a fresh perspective to bring to this, perhaps reflecting on some of the things that the others have said, is there anything that you think departments could do differently or better to support their new starters, particularly where this is perhaps like their first ever job or their first job in the civil service?
Yeah, I think touching on what, other people have mentioned, I think communication is vital and so important, whether that's, organising touch points to talk with other people, whether that's communication from your line manager, anything like that, or even clear expectations. I think that's so important. The other thing I think departments could do more of and should do really is just normalize that kind of natural feeling of anxiety, the uncertainty, feeling overwhelmed, to kind of make sure the new starter does feel settled, because they're so normal and it's so expected to feel like that. And a lot of that anxiety does just lie in the unknown. So I think naming it, whether the new starter has mentioned it or not, is really, really helpful, because it's going to come. At some point, you are going to feel overwhelmed. You are going to maybe experience some imposter syndrome, something like that. And I think the fact has already been named then kind of reduces that feeling of isolation within that. It's normal, and you do come out of it at the end, and that's okay. But I also think departments could just make sure they offer solutions to that as well. So naming it, but offer, a communication channel, go to this person to talk about this question, introductions across the team, things like that. So that would be the main thing I think departments could do. And that's what's really helped for me, especially as I'm still fresh.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. And Nat, a slightly different sort of angle of question for you now. But sometimes in the civil service, we have to work on topics that can be quite sensitive and have really big impacts on people's lives, or interact with challenging stakeholders. And I know that this is something that in your current role you face every day. So do you think you could give some reflections in particular on managing your well-being when working on like a really emotive portfolio?
Yeah, so recently a lot of my work has been done with universal credit claimants who don't have an online account for whatever reason. Normally it's because like they don't have the online skills, and also quite a lot of them have been essentially on a managed move of benefits. So there's like a change to the benefit system, like people are being moved over to universal credits. I've been dealing with a lot of them. Basically, a lot of these people are like very vulnerable. They're obviously on benefits. A lot of them have been on benefits for a while, and then on top of that, a lot of them have quite complex health conditions. And then on top of that, a lot of the time they're really not happy that they're being forced into this change that they have absolutely no say over. So it can be really challenging. People can say like quite mean or like difficult to hear things, and it is difficult to deal with. And then on top of that, with like my role, like as a whole, there's lots of people doing a similar role to me. Our job in the wider business is to answer these calls. So even if we have had like a challenging call, we then sort of need to pick up the next one, because if a claimant's been waiting for longer, it increases their chances of being upset, irritated when we do get to them, or even worse, they hang up and then don't necessarily call us back. It just causes more problems. So it is quite challenging from that perspective. I'd say probably the main thing I found that's helped is that basically talking to colleagues, pretty much everyone's dealing with like similar, like very rarely has something happened to me that hasn't happened to everyone else that I work with. So being able to like almost vent a little bit to them, and like you can almost like shrug it off, because like it's just one of those things that's happened. And I think having that like understanding that other people know what it feels like is really helpful, and helps me sort of get on with it, even if like I've had like a challenging call.
And could you talk a bit about how like managers can support people in those situations? What do you think the role of the manager is in helping employees to support their own well-being and remain resilient when you're dealing with potentially challenging customers or stakeholders or difficult circumstances?
Yeah, I think obviously one of the main challenges I sort of alluded to is like this mix of like the managers say like you need to look after your well-being, but also if we're not answering enough calls, like the managers are the ones who are going to hear it. So I think it is difficult for them to sort of strike a balance. I think obviously from my perspective as the person on the phone, I'm probably like a bit more like leeway and understanding, like if I've had a challenging call, like a bit more flexibility to take a small break just to like to clear the air. So I think like perhaps a closer management of that. I'd say like one thing that they do quite well is like they are available, they are online. There are lots of, even if like my specific line manager wasn't available, there are other managers that I'd be able to message and sort of explain what happens, and they'd be able to like basically support me if that's what I felt I needed.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. I think that point around support from your colleagues and support from your managers and being there for each other is something that's really important when you're working on things like that. Amber, coming then to you, I think that we can sort of all relate to the experience of basically starting a new job or starting in the early days of your career and feeling like you're making mistakes or receiving difficult feedback. Could you give us a bit of an insight into how you overcome setbacks in your early career and how you sort of handle getting potentially sort of challenging feedback at the start of your new job?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that kind of that notion of perfectionism, that you need to do everything right first time and you need to make a good impression, is definitely something that I've struggled with. And I feel like being on a scheme like the fast stream doesn't help with that, as a lot of the time they expect you to come in all guns blazing and kind of save the day, which isn't always, how things pan out. And I think school doesn't necessarily set you up that well, because in school you kind of need to get 100% on your tests and do really well. But in real life, like I've had to kind of change my mindset over the time that I've been on the fast stream and in the civil service just in general to make things work. So something I've learned is that actually kind of failing and getting feedback is part of the innovation kind of process. And there's actually this concept in project delivery called failing fast, which means if something isn't going to work out, you find out sooner rather than later so that you can change things and make them better. And I think that's particularly important in your early career, because if you could do everything perfectly, what are you doing here? Go be permsec, you know. If you've already got it figured out, why try and be on a learning scheme and develop? So that's one side of things. It's been changing my mindset. And in terms of how I've done that, it's things like getting a mentor or a coach that you can talk things through and put things into perspective and kind of reflect. For me, it's how would I treat one of my colleagues if they made the same mistake? Because I'm often a lot harder on myself than I would actually ever be to someone else. So I think that sense of perspective is useful. And then in terms of like personal life, obviously we all have our own challenges that we go through while we're working. We're not robots. So for me, I've got some vision problems, which have obviously they're with me all the time, even when I'm working. So for me, kind of overcoming those setbacks have been things like getting reasonable adjustments in how I do my work and my assessments. So I have a different setup on my screen. I have like webcams so that I can look at a bigger monitor. I do my assessments, like my fast stream tests, slightly differently to other people. For other people, that can be things like having a carer's passport. They're on a different journey. But I think that's another thing of overcoming a setback, is to not just think you've got to do it all on your own, as that would be quite isolating and challenging, but just being aware that it's okay to ask for help. And a bit like what Nat was saying earlier, you're not going to lose your job for asking for help. And maybe that's something I thought was going to happen at the start if I made a mistake or if I admitted some level of vulnerability.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, I think that's very true. That's something that people maybe we don't talk about enough, as we talk about setbacks in our careers and in our working life, but perhaps not how the things that make us a person outside of work and the things that we bring to work can impact our work. And yeah, really grateful to both you and Nat for sharing your experience of getting reasonable adjustments, talking to occupational health then. And hopefully to those listening, that really encourages you and inspires you to not be afraid to ask for that help, and that those services are there for a reason and really can help you to be the best version of yourself and excel in your early career. Amazing. Thank you both. Turning then to Barry, sort of a bit related to Amber's question, particularly focusing in on this idea of feedback. It's really important in our early careers that we get feedback, and to Amber's point, are allowed to fail fast and get feedback and therefore like iterate how we work. So could you talk a little bit about how managers can really support early career colleagues through the feedback that they give them?
Yeah, so when you're in your earlier career, you're going to make mistakes. That's normal, it's natural. But I think the way that feedback is delivered is quite very important. The actual process of delivering feedback to a colleague needs to be a supportive environment. It can't just be made feel like a bit of a punishment. And I think for me, it was regular, honest feedback. I was having these one-to-ones with a mentor and one-to-ones with my management and support officer where we could discuss, you know, any issues that have been brought up and how we actually deal with it. But it's the management, for me, it's the management to take the time to check in regularly. And instead of waiting for like formal one-to-ones or your formal reviews, it's touching base every now and again and sharing any problems that you might have had, making some sort of plan to overcome them, and giving you suggestions and actual practical support as to how you're going to improve. And so, but another thing as well, it's about celebrating the small wins. You can't always have feedback where you're talking about things that are not going so well. I think for me anyway, it's very special if your management can just come and talk to you and say, look, you've done something very well there. And that gives you that sort of motivation, and it makes you feel like what you're doing is absolutely correct. And again, something that we've talked about already is open communication. It's important for all colleagues, but especially ones in the early days of their career, that they need to have the ability to go to management and ask them, should the questions be embarrassing or not? And it's having these different ones you can go to, but it is very important to actually put your hand up and say, look, I'm struggling here and I need a bit of help.
Yeah, I think that's some really good points there, particularly around giving constructive feedback that's actually constructive, like supporting the people that you're helping to actually action the feedback that they're being given, and balancing that with making sure that you're calling out the times that they really succeed, because yeah, everyone needs that confidence boost, and also needs to be able to learn when things are going really well versus when things could maybe be improved. So thank you so much, that's really helpful. And finally then, Georgina, jobs in the civil service can be busy and often involve sort of balancing lots of different priorities. And I think that it's the experience of lots of us on this call that early in your career particularly, there can be loads of exciting opportunities to take on training or additional responsibilities, etc., to support your progression. So do you think that you could tell us a little bit about how you manage your time and your work-life balance whilst being able to make the most of those sorts of opportunities?
Yeah, of course. And I think it's possibly the flip side of the flexibility in the civil service being such a benefit. It can also be a little bit overwhelming, particularly coming in from not having those opportunities, like you say. I work in a really high performing, capable team. And like you say, there's opportunities to kind of get involved with all sorts of different things. And they all do. And they absolutely love their work, which makes it a lovely environment to be in. I think it's about setting boundaries. And I always say to them, like, challenge yourself. Does this need to be done today? Because you could always work more. You can do more. That flexibility allows you to work until 7, 8 o'clock at night if you wanted to. And often when you're interested in the topic, you do really want to. But I think it's constantly about saying, does this need to be done now? Or can it wait until tomorrow? Does it need to be done on a Friday night? Teachers log off at 4 o'clock on a Friday, although they work hard. 4 p.m. on a Friday is like sacred. So I try and like instill that in the team that I'm in now. Like 4 o'clock isn't early. You're allowed to log off and go and enjoy your weekend, as long as there's nothing pressing that needs to be done. And I think one thing that I did struggle with initially was the difference between the usual working times in London compared to Darlington, and didn't realise, but people in London tend to start a little bit later and work a little bit later. And initially when I started, I was starting early like I used to in school, and then still working late, which was too much. And I think it's coming back to those boundaries and setting those limits and really assessing, does this need to be done now? Can we pick it up later? And I think take on the opportunities that you want, but think about your life outside of work as well.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for all of your incredibly insightful answers and for sharing your personal experiences with us and to those watching at home. We're going to wrap up the session now, but it would be great if we could just whip round and give a quick sort of one sentence, couple of sentences answer that if you could go back and tell yourself one thing when you started your career that would have made a difference to your well-being, what would it be? We're going to start with Anna, if that's okay, given that you're the newest starter. Yeah, and then we'll pass on to Amber next.
Yeah, I would tell myself that we're all in the same boat, and people who are starting and everyone around you does actually want you to succeed and does want to support you as well. It's really easy to think after week 1, month 1, you need to know it all, but you don't, and that's not the expectation. So that's what I would tell myself.
Real. Amber.
I would say be kind to yourself. You're not expected to know all of the answers at the start of your career, and try and surround yourself with people that do know the answers.
Brilliant. Barry?
Yeah, one thing that I would go back and tell myself is don't put as much pressure on myself to perfect things from day one. And as Anna was saying, people around you do want you to succeed. So just be open, willing to learn, and put your hand up at any stage that you feel like you need help.
Amazing. Nat?
Yeah, I think I touched on this a bit, but I think having a better idea of what my job actually was, that would have eased a lot of like the angst I had. So
Brilliant. And then finally, Georgina.
I think mine would be to combat the imposter syndrome. I would tell myself that I am capable rather than doubting myself all the time. And the fact that I will fit in. I sound very different to a lot of the people that I work with in London. And that's kind of the whole point, moving jobs outside of London. we want people that sound a little bit different. We want people with totally different, diverse backgrounds. And I think it was a little bit overwhelming to start with, but I've got my head around it now. And yeah.
Amazing. Thank you all so much for your time. It was really lovely chatting to you. We are now going to go into a live Q&A for those who are watching at home. So yeah, looking forward to taking your questions.
Thank you everyone for sharing your varied experiences there. That was, I think, eye-opening for me, even for somebody who's worked at the charity for 6 years now. So it's really, really good insight. We're going to roll straight into the questions. So the first question that we have is, when you all first started, what was the, oh gosh, the screen's moving quickly on my side. What was the induction course like, if you even got one? And did it mention support services like staff networks, employee assistance program, or maybe the support that you got from the charity? So yeah, who wants to take that? Let's have a hand up from somebody who wants to go first. Hey, brilliant, thank you.
Yeah, I can go. Can I just check that everyone can hear me okay?
We can.
Perfect. Okay. So as the video, as the recording kind of touched on, I was a fast streamer. So if you join the fast stream, you do something called base camp at the start, which is a week or two of like training and getting to know the other people who are going to be on the same course as you, etc. That's not standard. I'd say more of the standard stuff that you get when you move jobs is at the start of your job, you should have some time with your line manager where they'll give you things like a building induction, like all of the boring stuff. But the stuff that you need, I guess, to know how to operate around the building and get around. There should also be some training in place, whether that's with different members of the team or whether they're going to ask you kind of what areas you feel like you need support on at the start. You should be having that conversation with your manager. And it will vary from job to job, but they shouldn't just throw you in at the deep end without any support. And if you ever feel like that, I would say speak to your manager. In terms of staff networks and employee assistance programs, you should be told at the beginning like how to access those things. So if you're not, then again, I'd be speaking to either your buddy if you get assigned one or your line manager about how to access them. Usually the intranet is always the first port of call. That's probably where they'll direct you because there'll be links to all of that stuff and how to access them on the intranet.
Thank you. So that's the experience from the fast stream perspective. Who else would like to share theirs? You choose.
Go on, Anna.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So my induction was kind of split into two. So there was an online induction with DBT, with the building induction, things like that. And then I had a face-to-face event in London, and people came in from different roles, different DG areas, just talking about what they do. And that did involve discussion about networks, mental health support and things like that. And also involved like a networking point as well. So you can talk to other people, new starters in your department. So it was really good. That part of it was online, do at your own pace. And then part of it was face-to-face as well. And it had the opportunity to ask questions, which was really good.
Oh, thank you. Do you want to go?
Yes, can do.
Thank you.
My induction process felt really overwhelming, I think. We had a course that was online and it was split between London and the campus where I am in Darlington. And it didn't feel like it had any real concept to it because it was so early on. What I did meet was a load of people that had also just started at the same time, and that was the biggest benefit, actually talking to them and being able to like still have those conversations now on this is still a little bit new. So that was a real big benefit. Maybe it's the corporate one. It was too early on for me. I didn't have anything to kind of link it to, but the people that I met, huge benefit to that.
Excellent. Barry is struggling to join us with signal at the moment, so it looks as though he's trying to get into the Q&A with us, but Barry's typed his answer here for me in the chat, and he said that when he started his career in the civil service, that we got together as a big group. As an apprentice, I completed my 1 day a week in college remotely from home, so it was great to meet everyone in person and get to know each other that way. Yes, we were informed of an employee assistance program, among with other support networks. So I will move on to the second question, if that's okay. And I've just lost myself in the chat. The question is, I struggle with how to look at any progression other than going from AO to EO in the same department. Any tips at all from any of you? I think Nathan's going to jump in on this one.
Yeah, I think something I'd say on the topic is like it's very easy to look at progression just as like rising through the grades, obviously, and like the current climate is also very easy to focus on like the salary increase as well. But I think from like my perspective, like it's more important to find a job that you enjoy, right? Or I'd certainly have that as like a high focus rather than just looking at any available promotion in the same department. If you can find something that you enjoy, you're more likely to be good at it, and sort of like the progression there like potentially comes like more naturally, because if you're good at it, if you enjoy it, you're going to be better at it. Those opportunities will come. So I think actually trying to understand like what types of roles you'd be interested in rather than just sort of applying for everything that's a promotion. And then the other thing is like obviously it depends from person to person. Some people might have sort of like location issues that stop them from like sort of narrow their pool of departments. But I think looking like beyond just the department that you're currently in is also like a really good idea, just because like this, like one of the benefits of the civil service is that there is so much out there. So I think you've got to try and like utilize that. There literally is a job for everyone somewhere in the civil service.
Thank you, Nathaniel. Anybody else have any other thoughts on that one? Yes.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. Yeah, I think what Nat said is right, that actually how you define progression is really important, and think about what's important to you beyond just the grade increase or the salary increase. But everyone likes a grade increase and a salary increase. And I think that one way that you can sort of like boost your chances is really by looking beyond your immediate role. So try to sign up for opportunities that might give you chance to like see other teams across your department, or indeed cross-department networks and opportunities. So yeah, getting involved in things like staff networks, or at the Department for Education, we have something called like the Shadow Leadership Team, which is like an opportunity that you can sign up to get exposure to like leadership team members and higher grades. And I think that doing things like that really sort of opens your eyes to the opportunities that are out there, and also can help sort of give you skills and experiences that you might not be able to get like within the confines of your current role. I also do a program called Beyond Boundaries, which I think is available to some departments, which gets you the chance to have some like mentoring sessions or coaching sessions, and also create a network with other people of like similar grades across departments. As Nat was saying, there are loads of opportunities to get jobs like in other departments, but sometimes that can feel really overwhelming if you don't know like how the application process specifically works in that department or what opportunities are out there. But trying to connect with people across departments gives you a bit of a way in and someone to ask questions to and things like that. So yeah, I'd really recommend looking beyond your current role and trying to take on as many opportunities as you can to meet people outside your department if you think you might be interested in working beyond there.
Okay, some really excellent suggestions there. Anybody else? Okay, I think we'll move on to the next question then. The next question we have is, any views about creating work relationships? My team is lovely, but I don't feel like I've really connected with anyone. My team are all online, and most have worked together in person before for years before going online. I joined after everyone went online. There's people I can go to with any work questions, but I feel like there's something missing. Go for it.
I can come in on this one first if you want, Amber, and then we can swap. This is something I really feel I sympathise with completely. I think it's so hard to build relationships online. And as you say, I feel the same. I don't feel like my work suffers, but you feel like there's something missing. And I think the best tip I can give is to set up calls in small groups, maybe 5 or 6. Don't know how big your team is, but to just talk about you and what you've done at the weekend, or what you like to do, or share some information about a holiday that you've been on, or a walk that you've done. So you really kind of see these people as humans rather than just a cog in the machine of government that you need to, the work you need to approve. And actually then slowly over time, you start to build more of an understanding of who they are. And I think then those relationships, your working relationships are better, and you start to show yourself more and you feel a lot more comfortable. So it takes time, but it doesn't happen as quick as it does in person. But that's really, really helped me. And I've got some really good friends in my team now.
Oh, thank you. Amber?
Yeah, so what I was going to say is sort of echoing Georgina's sentiment, which is that if there aren't spaces in your team at the moment, that sounds really difficult. You do have an opportunity there to create them, and that would look good as a development thing if you go for promotions in the future to show that. So the way that I've seen it work in some of the teams I've been in is on one of the teams, every Friday there'd be like a funny question, and everyone would join a chat for like half an hour right at the end of a Friday, and it'd be like really dumb stuff like you have to banish every kitchen utensil except one. Which one are you keeping? And we'd negotiate it, and that would be quite funny. Or like same with food, things like that. Or I've seen it in a different team where it would be like 30 minutes and you can talk about anything except work. You can't talk about work. And that, is amazing what you learn about people when you start doing that. And it becomes more organic over time. Like, sure, it's like forced fun at the start, but it does get better as you start to learn more about people. You can only ask about things that you know, right? And then the other thing that I've introduced in my current team that works quite well is basically like a temperature check in the team call. So yeah, we can all talk about like what we're working on, but how are we all doing? So it'd be like everyone would give a score out of 10, 10 being like I'm having the best day of my life, 1 being like I'm having a pretty bad week, and then a highlight and a low light. So you'd share kind of the best thing that's happened to you this week, maybe one thing you're finding difficult, and that just lends itself to people going, oh, I've experienced that, this is how I dealt with it. And then you just get to know people better and you start to break down the boundaries and it gets easier to talk. So that would be some recommendations of how I've dealt with it. Obviously you have to get management on board, I suppose, to start implementing these things, but it's important to staff retention and like long-term well-being, so they're usually quite keen to introduce those things.
Brilliant, thank you, Amber. And our disembodied Barry on the panel has chipped in with, I understand the frustration with regards to lacking friendly relationships when many people are working from home, but from my experience, I try my best to be in the office most days. That way I can get speaking with people in person, and sometimes it leads to doing things together outside work. I also enjoy going for walks in a local park with a few colleagues during lunch, enabling us to get to know each other a bit more. And for those of us that won our previous session today, there was some good conversation around having walking meetings as well, if that can be encouraged at all. The next question that we have is, my line manager is supportive, but don't feel like this is the role for me. However, I am now terrified of moving on and being the newbie again. I now have the dread of work so much that my weekends are spent worrying about Monday. How can I switch off? Any tips from the panel there? Yes, Nat.
I think probably what I'd say, and it sort of goes on from my previous answer, is if you are feeling like that over the weekend, I would really advise like thinking about why that is, what aspects of your job are making you feel like that. If it's anything that's at all specific about that job, then I really couldn't recommend looking at other jobs enough. As I've said, there's so many jobs in the civil service. I don't think anyone should have to feel like that over the weekend. It's a horrible thought. Like, I'm sure at some point in our lives, everyone sort of had that sort of existential dread. So I couldn't recommend highly enough, like thinking about why that is. And then once you're able to understand it, it might be something that you can address in your current job. You've mentioned like you don't want to move on. because you're scared of being new again. And obviously that is quite daunting, but I think you need to try and understand why you're feeling like that. Once you've done that, I think then you can sort of address, like start making steps to sort of try and resolve that issue. But until you sort of understand why you're feeling like that, I think it's quite difficult to suggest like there's no one fix all for all those sorts of situations.
Remember.
Yeah, I think what Naz just said is like totally true. When you say the role doesn't feel right, without going into like therapist mode, I guess my first thought would be like, are you able to nail down like what doesn't feel right about it? Is it that there's too much work? Is it that you don't feel skilled to do the work? Is it that you don't enjoy the work even though you're good at it and there's no problem doing it? Is it that you don't feel like you're gelling with the team well? I think if you can answer that first bit about why it doesn't feel right, that makes it easier, as it might be that switching jobs is the right thing to do, but if you haven't figured out why you don't like this job, there's a risk you might apply to the wrong kind of job and end up in that position again. And then the other thing I'd just recommend, and maybe this is just because like I switch jobs all the time by the nature of what I'm doing, but there's no shame in being the newbie, honestly. Think about how you treat a new person. You'd probably be quite nice, and if anything, you'd probably give them extra leeway because they're new, or at least I depend on people doing that for me. I play the new card all the time. So I just, don't be afraid of like switching it up and being new. There's no shame in not knowing stuff, especially when you're new.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I think totally agree with what's been said already. Thinking about how you could like manage your well-being in your current situation, like now, this weekend. I think I'd first of all make sure that like you turn your laptop off and that you don't have like, I definitely have like Slack and team notifications on my phone and I shouldn't. I think that making sure that you're not contactable when you're not working, like you're entitled to that boundary and shouldn't have to be like having reminders of work when you're not working, but also really have a think about what you could do on a Monday to make that like transition back into work a bit easier. So I block out like an hour of my day on, I actually have a non-working day on a Monday, but because of that I've got quite a lot of things to catch up on. So I block out time on a Tuesday to make sure that like I can't be thrown straight into meetings and I've got enough time to like catch up on things, and that really helps me feel less anxious over the weekend because I know that I've got that time and space to really get up to speed. So you mentioned that like your manager's supportive, potentially have a chat with your manager about any strategies that you can put in place to make sure that Mondays are a bit of an easier day, a bit less scary for you. And equally, what can you do on a Sunday to like have fun and relax and make sure that you're sort of prioritizing doing things that mean that you're not thinking about work, that you're spending time with family and friends as much as you possibly can, exercising, going on walks, that sort of thing. So yeah, I'd really agree with the looking to the future, but also in terms of managing your well-being in the time now, think about what you can do, like manage that transition point into the week and make it a bit happier for you.
Thank you. Before I get to Barry's contribution, I'm just going to say from a charity perspective, we would very much welcome you to book a wellbeing conversation with us. There is also the Thrive Wellbeing app. So please do have a look on the website because I think that would probably be helpful for you. Barry's contribution, Barry from the Void, has said, when I worked in retail prior to the civil service, I felt like this quite often. If you can't switch off from work, you become drained and exhausted when you have to go back. Having joined the civil service, I learned that it is extremely important to be resilient. And for me to achieve this, I always ensure I have something planned for the weekend that included physical exercise, because for me anyways, I found physical exercise was not only good for my body, but it also took my mind off work. The charity does also have a smarter working sort of area, which helps you to find a sort of healthier work-life balance as well. And we also have resources around resilience as well. So I'm sort of seconding what Barry has said there. Though I think we've got time for one last question. The last question is, thinking back to when you applied, what's one thing you wish you'd known about the civil service? Go for Amber.
I think I just wish I'd understood like how diverse it is and how many different opportunities there are to get involved. I'll be honest with you, when I applied, I thought it was gonna be a lot more like stuffy than it was and a lot less diverse. And I didn't think there'd be that many opportunities to get involved in like networks and do loads of kind of other stuff. So I think that's the main thing. And I get contacted on LinkedIn sometimes with people thinking about joining the civil service, and the thing I always say to them is, yeah, there's a lot of diversity and there's a lot of different people, and you're allowed to be yourself. You don't have to fit into some sort of mold. And the same goes for like if you're applying with reasonable adjustments. I wish I'd known how accommodating the civil service could be for reasonable adjustments at the start, and that you'll be supported in going for that if you need them, as I probably made things harder than I needed to for myself at the start.
Yeah, just go on, sorry.
I was just gonna. It's just a tiny little addition to Amber's. It's about how each department's really different as well. I thought they were all kind of the same, but just producing different outputs. But they're actually really not in terms of their culture and their priorities. So speaking to somebody from the departments is probably really helpful to get a sense of whether you're a good fit.
What I was just going to say was I'd wish I'd known more about the trade unions when I started. Like I ended up joining PCS, but depending on what role you're in, there are different ones that might be better for you. And I found like in the first few months, like they were able to help me resolve an issue I had with some working from home equipment. So like straight away there, like I found them incredibly useful. Like I went to them, they were able to sort it, and it took a lot of stress off my mind. So like that's probably something I'd recommend.
I think I'd add that I wish I'd known, or I wish I'd been like less scared to try something new. Like the jobs can sometimes sound a bit like unusual or potentially boring, or like you might not know what the job description really means until you're in there. But actually, I started a job that I didn't think would be for me and then really loved it. So I wish I'd sort of been a bit less scared to like try new things. Might find out that you actually really enjoy it, and if you don't, as others have said, there's so many other opportunities within the civil service, and once you're like in, then you have access to lots of internal jobs and like the chance to try lots of new things. So yeah, I wish I'd been sort of like less afraid to try something new, and really sort of open myself up to the other opportunities that come once you're in the civil service.
Yes, please.
Just to add to Jess's point, really, in the sense that I wish I'd known that, we're all in the same position, and actually lots of people, jump between jobs. They're not sure if their role was right for them at the beginning, and actually realizing that just having that open conversation with people, loads of people have gone through that, loads of people worked in different places, and just opening up that line of communication. I think if I knew that on my first day or first week, that would have kind of reduced anxiety there, but it's been really, really helpful.
Brilliant, thank you. And from backstage, Barry, as you know, seems to be being referred to. Barry says, one thing I wish I knew from the start was the amount of opportunities and different career paths that exist within the organisation. As someone mentioned earlier, that their role might not be for them, but it's important to keep an eye out for the opportunities that may arise, such as fast stream programs, moving roles, or even temporary promotions. And that is all we have time for. So thank you very much to everybody on the panel. Sorry that some of you have struggled with connections at times, but we very, very much appreciate your input. So yeah, some great comments from people in the chat on this. So thank you very much for contributing to the conference this year. It is, as I say, very much appreciated. Thank you all of us who have joined over the course of the week. Please do come back and view any of the recordings if there are any sessions that you might have missed. And just remember that we are always here for you. Thank you very much, folks, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and get to the weekend.